Good evening and welcome to the West Seattle Chamber's debate with the candidates for King County Executive. We are streaming this debate from our fellow West Seattle Chamber member, Live Oak Audio Visuals live streaming studio. Learn more about their live and virtual event services at www.liveoakav.com. Tonight, we have the current King County Executive, Dow Constantine, and his challenger, State Senator Joe Nguyen. King County Executive Dow Constantine is a lifelong West Seattleite and a graduate of West Seattle High School. He has earned 3 degrees from the University of Washington for undergrad, grad school, and law school. Dow represented West Seattle as state representative, state senator, and county council member before being elected executive. As the executive, Dow put King County on sound financial footing with consistent AAA bond ratings from all rating agencies. He originated the Best Starts for Kids, led the successful work to expand light rail through Sound Transit 3, and has led one of the most effective COVID responses of any major metropolitan region. Dow lives in the Alki Admiral neighborhood with his wife Shirley and their 7-year-old daughter Sabrina, a stone's throw away from the house in which he was raised and where his parents still live. Joe Nguyen is the current 34th Legislative District State Senator and a lifetime King County resident, born and raised in White Center to Vietnamese refugee parents. He attended Seattle University and currently works at Microsoft. Joe is the first Vietnamese American Washington State Senator and is proud to be the first person of color to represent the diverse district which he calls home. Today he lives in West Seattle with his wife, Tally, and their 3 young children. The rules of tonight's debate are as follows. I will ask a candidate a question in which they will have 2 minutes to provide their answer. After that 2 minutes, the other candidate will have a 1-minute time frame for response, and after that response, the first candidate will be offered 30 seconds for rebuttal. We will alternate between who takes each question first to provide equal time over the course of the debate. If I, as the moderator, decide it would be good for our viewing audience, I may ask a follow-up question to dive deeper or add clarity. That will trigger an additional minute for each candidate for response. With all of the formality out of the way, let's move on to opening statements. State Senator Joe Nguyen, we'll start with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us on this night as well. I'm Joe Nguyen, the current state senator here in the 34th Legislative District, and very fortunate to represent the West Seattle area as well. And like a lot of you, I first got involved in the community because I wanted to serve the people who are here. And I first started off working with housing and homelessness, and then also with the Office of Law Enforcement and Oversight in King County. And candidly, through that experience, felt that we needed leadership that reflected the values of this community as well. And when I first ran for office, it's because I believed that we deserved better. And I was tired of spending so much of my energy and time trying to convince elected officials to do the right thing. And that's why I ran for state senate a few years ago. And I believe we need that type of leadership right now because we need leaders who are going to be accountable to the people. Because that's what you do every single day as small business owners. You are accountable to your customers, you're accountable to the people, and that's who you serve. Candidly, I didn't think that I would ever get into public office as the son of refugees from White Center. I just wanted to be able to serve this community so much because when I was a young kid, my father was involved in a car accident that left him quadriplegic. And my brother and I would have to carry him up and down the front steps of our house in order to get to doctor's appointments. And one day, one of our neighbors came by and said, "Hey, why are you carrying him up down the stairs?" And it was because we couldn't afford a ramp. And he came by and built one for us. That's the type of community that I was raised in. That's the type of community that we have in King County right now. And that's what we should have for the future of our generations as well. So thank you so much for the time.
County Executive Dow Constantine.
Well, thank you, Dan. I'm King County Executive Dow Constantine, a lifelong West Seattle resident and believe it or not, a former board member of this chamber. I was a young attorney and a member of the chamber and served as the land use chair for quite some time, and I really appreciate the work the chamber continues to do to help keep our business community vibrant in West Seattle and on the Duwamish Peninsula. Many of the challenges are tougher now. I mean, the economy in a lot of ways is more robust than it was when I was serving, but we're facing these enormous upheavals in our community, and none less than COVID. When COVID hit, it hit our county first in the nation. We centered our response on science, on reason, and in doing so, saved lives. The New York Times said that had the rest of the nation followed our lead, some 300,000 Americans who perished would still be alive today. Now we're moving forward with vaccine verification, and it too will save lives, and keep businesses open, keep our economy growing, keep our schools open. That is the key here. We have to be able to live with the recurrence of this virus, with its continuing presence, and be able to keep our economy functioning. I led not only the COVID response, but the creation, as you mentioned, of Best Starts for Kids, the creation of Sound Transit 3, an enormous collaboration between labor, business, and other parts of the community. While others are squabbling, I am leading a similar coalition to take on the enormous challenge of homelessness, buying thousands of hotel and other housing units. My administration has consistently set the pace on environmental restoration, on animal welfare, on social justice, on financial stewardship, and much more. And I'm really honored to serve and honored by the support of those with whom I have served, including Eastside Business Alliance and the Rental Housing Association, as well as unions and dozens of Democratic legislators. I look forward to an exciting discussion tonight.
This first question will be our only yes and no question, and there will be several questions following up to clarify your points on your answer here. I'll start with State Senator Joe Nguyen. Do you support defunding the police 50%?
First off, I think this is a loaded question. Generally, yes.
Executive Constantine.
No.
So we're hearing a lot of concerns from our membership and folks in the community in general around public safety. I'd like to open tonight's debate with this question, and I'll start with State Senator Joe Nguyen. What does public safety mean to you, and what do we need to do to achieve it?
Thank you for the question, and that's kind of piggybacking off of what we had talked about previously as well, is we need to make investments that actually gets us true public safety. Everything from parks to community centers, even after-school activities for our kids helps us get to better public safety, making sure that we have resources so that folks in our business community feel safe in their businesses as well. There was actually an article in the Seattle Times the other day where the SPD, the Seattle Police Department, commissioned a study that showed that over 80% of the responses was for non-criminal activity. So in my mind, we need to have more investments in those types of community safety programs that doesn't necessarily acquire a person with a gun to be able to make those responses. So to me, public safety is investing in our communities, utilizing our resources appropriately, ensuring that not just law enforcement, but the community feels safe in that capacity as well. So that's why I think it's important that we have these in-depth conversations, is because public safety means a lot of things to different people. So the fact that over 80% of the calls aren't for criminal activity suggests that we need to do it a different way.
All right, County Executive, 1 minute.
So defund the police has been a popular slogan in some circles, but it is at best a gross oversimplification of what needs to happen. We have to bring a much broader approach, a community-based approach to safety, and that means that we need much more behavioral health assistance and human services alongside of police and with the full participation of communities to create genuine safety. And when I say safety, I don't just mean safety from someone who might be looking to victimize you, a criminal, stranger. It also means feeling safe, and many people don't, from agents of the state. People need to be confident that when they are engaged with a police officer, they're not in danger themselves. I want to finish by just telling an anecdote. I was in the Junction today. I was actually at 35th and Alaska, and there was a huge police response for an incident, and we'll talk about it in a minute here. Those are police officers who were needed at that moment by those people.
Excellent.
And what's funny is that the folks who I think would use that slogan actually want the exact same thing. One of my neighbors is an SPD officer, and we've had long discussions about this as well. And that's kind of our point, is that we need to have investments in behavioral mental health, in diversion programs, in ways that we can actually keep people safe. So the whole point is that this has been ignored for so long, and it wasn't until folks in the community start pushing for these things did we actually start talking about them. If we're able to actually redeploy these law enforcement officials into these critical spaces where there is a crime happening, that makes us all safer, and then saving that energy and effort when they're not needed in community-based solutions.
Thank you. I have heard from our community that there is both a lot of support and a lot of concern about restructuring the law enforcement community. Most of the folks I speak with are fully in favor of finding additional resources to respond to mental health and drug crisis situations that do not revolve around a uniformed officer responding. Concerns we are hearing expressed are that we are drawing down our officer resources before replacement is up and running. This question will be to you, Executive. What do you believe is the appropriate timeline in which to transfer services from police sheriff's office to a yet-to-be-tested new entity? And what should we do in the time of transition to ensure public safety?
So the premise of the question is not exactly in line with what we're really doing, because we are not reducing the number of police officers. We actually have a lot of vacancies right now at the King County Sheriff's Office that we're trying to fill, because our job is to make sure that those police can respond in a timely way across a vast geography. The issue is narrowing the scope of things the police are required to respond to, because we've gotten to the point in this country where we rely on an armed officer to respond for almost everything. And that is not appropriate. It's leading to unnecessary conflicts and tragedies. So I would put it a little bit different way. Now is the time for us to be engaged in kind of redefining the way we do policing, and to identify the additional resources we need to put alongside the police and with the cooperation of community. And we are doing that. We've convened a community working group with community members from so-called over-policed communities, with people whose families have been victims of state violence, and also with police officers themselves, to help us identify what the new duties and structures of the sheriff's office will be, and ultimately for me to appoint a new sheriff.
Thank you. State Senator?
Yeah, thank you so much. And what's interesting is that a lot of this conversation is not different from folks who would say that they would want to reduce the funding for law enforcement in order to invest in these types of things. So our talking points are largely going to be the same. And what's interesting, too, is that it shouldn't have taken George Floyd or the actions over the past few years for folks to understand that that was a dire need in our communities. We've had folks for decades fighting for these issues, ensuring that we have investments in behavioral mental health and community-based solutions that haven't happened until what we've seen in the past couple of years. So in terms of the appropriate timeline, I think right now is a great start. It should have been 10, 20 years ago for us to actually address some of these systemic things. But also, when we talk about public safety, like you said before, is investing in the community to ensure that these things don't happen in the first place. So it does have to be done in partnership. King County is very different than Seattle. Let's start with that. By being able to have these community-based solutions stood up in the next couple of years as a new sheriff is being put into place, someone who has a similar mindset of rethinking what this should look like, I think that's key.
Would you like a 30-second?
So again, you know, I've actually had to confront these realities, the pressure to sort of blindly defund the police without getting to the underlying reality that we have been underfunded in King County for many years. The incident I saw today was a perfect example, though, of the changing terrain. The gentleman who was being arrested by the police was homeless, clearly having a mental health break, and had smashed a window at the Knockout Auto Repair on Alaska. And the police converged there. Jail is not going to solve his problem. We need these other services we're talking about. But a crime was committed against that property owner, and they deserve to be protected from it.
So a quick redirect. With us having openings in the sheriff's department, some of that has been publicized, being the current sentiment of defunding the police has had people move to lateral movements to other places. If we're filling those spots, that's great. We don't have the systems in place yet. We've used the police as the catch-all of everything society's not been good at. I think
That's
we can all
correct.
agree on that. Mental health, drug addiction, rolls downhill, we expected the cops to deal with it. Unfair for the police to do. We don't have those services up and running yet. How fast can we get those services up and running, and what's the most critical service to provide first?
Well, are you asking me
I'll
first?
go down then.
I do think it's behavioral health. That's absolutely critical. A lot of the crime that's happening in business districts is related to people who are either addicted or have untreated mental health challenges. I've put two, we're putting two more behavioral health street teams out there 24/7, including one that will be traveling so it can come to West Seattle White Center, Burien, et cetera, to engage people, to get them inside, to get them the help they need. These are the folks you've seen on TV in the sort of Seattle is Dying documentaries. And I really think that that is the key when you're talking about homelessness, when you're talking about early childhood development, and when you're talking about the criminal legal system. The gap, the missing piece is robust behavioral health response, treatment on demand.
State Senator?
Yeah, similar. Well, in the sense that it should be behavioral health, and also law enforcement has been having attrition even before some of these conversations as well. So this is not necessarily new. King County right now spends over $700 million of biennium on the behavioral health space. And the frustrating part is that one of the largest providers of behavioral health is the jail. So in our current system, we wait until something happens before we try to address it. Literally, one of the reasons why I'm trying to get involved now and why I have gotten involved in the legislature is to mitigate some of these things up front. But the problem is also we only have 2 detox facilities in all of King County that's ran through the county as well, largely in the Seattle area. So if we're talking about the behavioral health, we need crisis stabilization centers that aren't being addressed right now. And also these detox facilities that could potentially be used to help mitigate some of this harm, largely, not largely, but have a few dozen beds that are actually empty right now as well. We don't have enough services to support these facilities. So with the money that we're using within the county, they should be diverted towards service providers to open up some more centers for crisis response to help mitigate some of these harms on the streets.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to take a minute to discuss here White Center, an area that I know is near and dear to both of you. We've seen a lot of issues on both sides of Roxbury, so Seattle and unincorporated, including multiple shootings, a staggering amount of fires, and constant business break-ins. This has turned into a sense of being left behind for both the community and the small businesses there. White Center has always been considered a little gritty, and the neighborhood has always embraced that image. What is happening today is not gritty. It is a new situation, and it is a bigger issue of public safety. The LGBTQ community, the business community, and the citizens of White Center feel attacked, and that the response to date has not been proportional to the crisis. What can you do as King County Executive to bring peace of mind, safety, and stability back to the community and encourage to rebuild their businesses or for new folks to move in and reinvest in the neighborhood? And I believe...
No, thank you so much. White Center is near and dear to my heart because I am from there, and my family had a small business when I was growing up on that heart of the street in White Center as well. So that's not just property crime. That's the destruction of people's livelihoods, of their dreams and their passions, and we feel for them. And that's why I spent time with business owners yesterday on a call regarding their demands and their needs. The thing is, we have a strong community. And luckily, we have been able to be resilient, but they need our help as well in public office. And they have a list of demands in terms of how they would make public safety forefront, but also how do you reinvest in our communities. Right now, there are funds for some of the small businesses to be able to access $25,000 in order to help rebuild. I think getting those out will be very important. I think the other thing, too, is making sure that some of these demands that they have on this list be met, whether it's helping fund a community safety person to be able to patrol in the evenings. Right now, over the past couple of decades, I think the sheriff's office only has 2 folks that are in that jurisdiction. I don't think necessarily we need a law enforcement response, but definitely need somebody who is there at the very least keeping an eye on things. And there's also a request for funding, about $2 million, to help reinvest and rebuild in these communities, because this is the future of our county. We want to make sure that we don't displace our communities, especially after something that's tragic like this as well. So there's a whole host of things that can be done to address these needs in White Center.
So for people who are unfamiliar, there have been a series of fires in White Center. They're sort of superficially unrelated. One big one was arson. Another was started apparently accidentally by homeless people. Another was a cigarette that was left burning. But they have this cumulative impact on the business community. We're deeply engaged with the White Center business community, we meaning King County right now. I have already put out almost $110,000 in aid specifically to the businesses that were impacted by fire, but also $1.3 million to White Center businesses this year for COVID recovery. And we have many millions of additional dollars ready to go to aid BIPOC businesses, businesses that have been disadvantaged during COVID. But in addition to that, we've been working for years to help the White Center community through things like my Conservation Corps. Conservation Corps hires formerly homeless people to pick up litter and paint out graffiti. They've picked up 40 tons of litter in White Center this year alone, and we're increasing that group from about 6 people to some 400 workers out cleaning up the streets of unincorporated King County.
No, I think one of the unfortunate parts about being in unincorporated King County is that oftentimes you get ignored from the political community because there's a lack of investments that's there. This happened when I was a young kid growing up in that area, and it continues to happen right now. And the reason why I fight so hard specifically for those areas is that they've been historically been left out. So at the very least, I'm glad that it's being brought up now, but these issues have been persistent, and we have to address them.
Yep. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, you probably knew this question was coming. Given your proximity to the West Seattle Bridge and where you guys live, there's no way that you have not been impacted by its closure, just as the rest of us have. Knowing that the bridge is an SDOT asset, and so the repairs fall on the city, what can King County do to support additional transit options to move the citizens of West Seattle quickly and efficiently with less reliance on the bridge? No, to get down.
So we increased the frequency of the water taxi crossings, maintaining the summer schedule into the winter months because it's a great alternative to all other modes. But we also increased the bus service to West Seattle. All bus service was reduced, except White Center actually, during COVID. But we increased the bus service to West Seattle to help people get in and out across the low-level bridge. We're putting county funding, transit funding, into Seattle's rebuild of the bridge. And we are, of course, continuing to work toward that day when we're connected by high-capacity transit to the rest of the system as well. King County is very focused on mobility. We are the mobility agency. And I think that our efforts, including the startup of a new rapid ride line that will be the Rapid Ride Line H through White Center, is going to continue to make us better connected. The bridge obviously was something that none of us who were not at the city saw coming. I actually was told about it the day they closed it. But you know, they might have given me a heads up. But it is a fact that we are getting this region knit together with high capacity quality transit.
Thank you. And fortunately, I had the opportunity to tour the bridge this past week, and I will say that it is on time and scheduled to open by mid-2022, and the work being done right now has stabilized it, caught it, and will be fixed. One of the biggest ways for us to invest in our infrastructure the most efficiently is by connecting the transit systems that we currently have right now, with obviously the limited dollars that we may have. So everything from sidewalks, crosswalks, curb cuts, being able to connect the transit options by connecting the people that are there will be one of the key issues that we have. And what's interesting is that in the last forecast at the county, the sales tax revenue for transit was a bit higher than what they had anticipated previously as well. So with that additional funds, we can be using it to invest in these multimodal efforts.
Well, a couple things. One, we continually go back to the legislature and ask for help with transit. Washington State has a terrible record on supporting transit from the state government to locals. We have sales tax to rely on, which is by any measure the most regressive kind of tax you can have. When we go to ask for help, often what we end up with is just the opposite. Sound Transit actually lost ground in the state legislature this year. I would ask the legislature to fund transit and to fund those repairs to the West Seattle Bridge.
Thank you. So we have exceeded our growth targets in West Seattle for the Seattle Master Plan. We're, I believe 10 years ahead of density. We have more density on the way. We're not going to build enough roads to get out of this upcoming traffic nightmare. Well, we're already in one, but it's going to get worse. We at the Chamber advocated and believe in Sound Transit 3 will be the next big step in moving our neighbors, employees, and customers in and out of West Seattle. My question to you is, what would your role as King County Executive be to help ensure that West Seattle is delivered light rail as soon as possible? So how would you help deliver this project? And on a side note, is Skylink a possibility or a distraction at this point? State Senator
Yeah, first off, the executive's role is significant in that decision. Obviously, both of us live in this area, so we understand how important that is for mobility as well. And also knowing that there's only one main corridor, the West Seattle Bridge, if that were to go down, that obviously is devastating for our community. So getting this done faster is incredibly important. That's why we've been so engaged at the state level to find funding and alternative ways to get this done faster, whether it's through permitting, whether it's through resources, or being able to have a slimmed down version that gets the transit spine up as we do the ancillary stuff later as well. So I think it's incredibly important. As it relates to Skylink, I do think it should be explored. We need to understand the implications associated with it and the costs associated with it as well, because I think feeder routes towards our sound transit stations are going to be important. So not only is it having transit on that spine for ST3, but how do you get people to there? So I haven't seen the reports technically yet, so we'll have to see what that looks like, but I think it should be considered.
If I can jump in, is Skylink, would you be for it if it was a replacement of light rail, or would you be for it if it was addition to, or both?
Addition to.
Addition to. Thank you.
So I hope everybody got to see the opening of Northgate Link. It was fantastic to be there, to be able to see the result of all of the work we've been doing over the years. And I want to particularly salute former Mayor and County Councilmember Greg Nichols, who really made Sound Transit 2, including Northgate Link, happen. I made it my job to make Sound Transit 3 happen. I worked over the course of a decade to build the coalition between business and labor and environmental groups, and went to the legislature, got the authority, created the plan, and got it approved at the ballot in 2016, and we are now building that out. As for Skylink, and I will say this, we need light rail to come to West Seattle because that's the most transit capacity we'll have, and because that's the way you can then extend it to White Center, Burien, and back into the valley to Renton, which is in the planning stages now. So if we don't have light rail in West Seattle, none of those other communities will get linked. I've asked for a study of Skylink. I'm going to be bringing forward a motion at the Sound Transit Board so that they can study it and show the pros and cons. And we can talk more about that if there's time the rest of the evening.
Perfect. Anything else?
No, that's good. I think the idea that we need to be investing more in this infrastructure is key, and that's why the legislature has been much more keen as well. So in my time there, we have advocated for more funding as it relates to connecting our various communities and routes associated with that as well.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to homelessness here. The frustration with an ever worsening homeless crisis continues to escalate. We've spent hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars on the problem over a long period of time here, and it seems to only continue to get worse. Now, obviously, there's a worldwide pandemic that caused massive disruption in people's economic abilities to survive, and so that's part of the current problem. Our affordable housing situation has only continued to escalate. Our mental health and drug addiction issues continue to be prevalent on the streets of Seattle and King County, and many of us believe that this has just become the new normal. I hope that upsets you guys as much as that upsets me, that we accept what's happening as the new normal. That said, we seem to continue to do the exact same things and expect a different result. We're hopeful as a society that this new combined effort between King County and Seattle and other neighboring cities will finally put together the strategies necessary to tackle these issues. What would your role be in this new organization as the King County executive? And what have you done over your career to address this situation, and what should you have done differently? We'll start with Dow.
Okay, so you're talking about the regional homelessness effort. I put that together. We got the county council and the city council to agree to essentially give up some authority so we could have a united effort. That is about the crisis response for the people who are currently homeless. But there are much bigger systems at work here. I mean, first of all, the causes are things like income inequality, which is a national and global phenomenon, and this overheated housing market we have, which is a byproduct of the remarkable economic story that's happened here. But we are taking on new approaches that have been made possible in the last couple of years, including buying 1,600 hotel rooms and other units to move people out of chronic homelessness into housing with the services to stay housed. We are standing up another 500 24-hour-a-day enhanced shelter spaces to move more of those people off the streets. As I said, I'm hiring 400 workers, people who are formerly homeless and unemployed, to help us clean up our parks, our streets, and put this county back together. And the key for a lot of people to get out of homelessness is getting behavioral health help. They may not have become homeless because of a behavioral health problem, but they may have developed that since they became homeless. And it's a long climb back up. So we could really use the help of the state legislature with some of these things. We could really use the funding help. It would be great if we built our behavioral health system into one that is up to the scale of the challenge, because I think we have now a lot of the other pieces in place.
Thank you. State Senator?
Yeah, thank you so much. And kind of to your question as well, you kept saying we're doing the same things and expecting a different result. And that's literally why I got involved in this first place, because it was called different things at different times, whether it's 10-year plan to end homelessness, the 5-year plan to end homelessness. Now it's the regional approach to end homelessness. A lot of these solutions are very similar, and we've discussed them in the past as well. And the current leadership hasn't been able to deliver on these issues. And hence why I ran for office, was because as an advocate in that space, working in the homelessness space, I noticed that it was 3 to 5 times cheaper to keep somebody housed than it is to take them out of homelessness. And we've waited too long to try to address a lot of these issues. And by the way, a lot of these issues face the same type of scenarios, whether it's public safety, whether it's affordability, whether it's homelessness, behavioral mental health crisis. It's investing in people. We haven't done that over the past few decades. We haven't been doing that now, and it's time for change for us to actually address this crisis the way that it is.
So, first of all, we, of course, have been preventing people from becoming homeless. The first program, the Best Starts for Kids, when it passed in 2015, was children and family homelessness prevention. We prevented 10,200 kids and their families from becoming homeless just with that program alone. So that is true. It's much less expensive. But the statement about the regional homelessness efforts shows a lack of understanding. The problem with those previous things was that they united sort of the planning and the intent, but not the authority and the accountability. And the point of creating this new official entity is to unite those things so they can be effective.
Thank you. On economic recovery, the money distributed by the City of Seattle, King County, and Washington didn't really come close to making a dent in the overall need of the small business community. Specifically, business sectors were asked to completely shut down, massively reduce operating hours and capacity, all for the greater good of society, and many businesses were glad to do it. Now that those same businesses are on the front line of enforcement for the varying government regulations around COVID protocols, most of that will fall onto owners and the staff to handle enforcement, but with no compensation or training to de-escalate. Do you feel that King County owes these businesses and their staff more than just a thank you? And what can you do as the King County executive to help support those owners and workers in their recovery? I'll start with State Senator Nguyen.
100%. And what's interesting is at the state level, King County and Seattle were large enough jurisdictions to get their own allocations of the COVID pandemic response money, while the state had to allocate it everywhere else as well. So there's going to be finite resources all around. But we do know that certain communities and certain industries were hit harder than others, and certainly can have targeted responses in those areas. So say, for instance, having a restarting fund for whether it's hospitality sector or even the arts community as well, and making sure that we're also providing the equipment needed for these jurisdictions to be able to open up. And if we couldn't do that, maybe have permitting be a lot faster so it's not so much red tape, being able to open up these spaces as well. So certainly need more investments in these particular spaces during this incredibly tough time. But the biggest thing is saying thank you to the folks who have been complying, who have gotten vaccinated, who are complying with these mandates in order for us to open back up as well. But we need to invest more in these communities. And again, a lot of this stuff has been exacerbated because of the pandemic, but persisted even before.
Mm-hmm.
So we have put together, I think, 8 COVID budgets now, special budgets for COVID, including one in which we allocated some $630 million toward COVID recovery, and about $400 million of that is in the range of the various things you're talking about: reopening assistance, trying to help small businesses, helping the cultural community, and that money is now getting put out through requests for proposals. We put $30 million, for example, into helping the cultural community reopen. The arts, heritage, culture, science organizations, first to close, last to reopen, tens of thousands of people who need to get put back to work. For restaurants, hundreds of them petitioned us to have a vaccine verification program so that they could make sure their customers were safe and they weren't having to be the only ones out there trying to enforce reason. And so we have done that, and we have resources available to restaurants and other businesses to help them make that happen.
Sounds like we need to be doing more in this case as well because the investments are not quite enough. So I appreciate the work being done right now. I think the biggest thing is to partner with our local communities and having sat down with them to talk about what these challenges may look like. Some of them financial, some of them actually aren't, whether it's making the permitting process better, making some of the street improvements permanent as well. So those are other things that should be considered.
Excellent. I'd like to redirect on technology support for vaccination verification, if possible. As a bar owner and restaurant owner, I do know that people have fake vaccine cards. I've heard them talk about it. I've kicked people out of the bars for it. Is there any digital assistance coming besides the MyQR where you can see it on a phone? But is there any database or scanning that can happen to help verify that these are actually legitimate cards that aren't putting our staff and customers at risk? I'll start with Dow.
So this has been a long conversation with the state. Their database has about 2/3 of the vaccine records. And we offered just to go forward alone as a county and do it ourselves, but they wanted to have a unified system. We said, okay. So they are now standing up a state system which will get those 2/3 of the records and then be able to import other records in a verified way so that we'll have a single technological system. You know, it's part of the job that you're constantly trying to herd the cats. And so we're in this continual conversation with the state government and other local governments about how we're going to proceed on these things. But that also produces good results, like the results we collectively got in COVID right from the get-go.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is a portal available right now to be able to upload your information to be verified as well. So that is coming.
Perfect. Yeah, we've seen the ability to upload stuff, but then we don't get the business end doesn't get a verification on it. I think that's the part that a lot of the small businesses are feeling frustration about, that we're kind of the enforcers and the police of vaccine mandates, but we don't have the technical support to really execute it appropriately or verify that it's accurate. So appreciate your guys' responses there. We have learned with the bridge going down and T5 getting ready to open just how incredibly important the Port of Seattle is to not just Seattle, but the region and quite frankly, the country. Lived experience of myself that I cannot get products in for my business because they are stuck on cargo containers outside, can't get to the port, can't move the product. Can you tell us about your existing relationship with the port and how you will continue to support its critical needs around infrastructure growth, both at the seaport and the airport? One of the big things we're seeing right now is that a cargo container was $1,500 to land over here, and now it's $20,000. So all of our cost of goods are going through the roof faster than anyone can increase their prices, further squashing, I wouldn't even say profit margin, because most of us aren't in profit margin right now with COVID. So what can we do to support getting more product in through our port and keeping those family wage jobs thriving down at the Port of Seattle? State Senator.
Yeah, thank you. No, we've been in close contact with the port, not just because of this pandemic, but previously as well, helping allocate millions of dollars towards infrastructure for T5 to be able to open, even having the electrification of the shore power so that way when the cargo ships are here, they're not spewing diesel into our air. So there's been close contact about that. And specifically around these issues right now with the supply chain, making sure that King County is working with the local jurisdictions and the port to ensure that the freight mobility is available. So I think one of the hardest parts when you already have a global supply chain disruption is that you don't want to have to deal with it locally as well. So whether it's traffic improvements, whether it's the roads, whether it's helping with infrastructure, I think those are ways that the King County exec can be able to lead in that space.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, of course, we have a close working relationship with the port. We have the exact same geography, the exact same constituency, different book of business, but very much overlapping. One of the ways in which we work closely with the port is on workforce and on contracting. And so we have worked to unify our small business rosters, for example, so that you can sign up for registration to be a qualified small business once, and you can do business with the port, with King County, with the City of Seattle, and others. Transportation is really the land transportation is really the critical issue here, and anybody who goes near the West Seattle Bridge sees the trucks backed up both directions every day now, and that is not a sustainable situation, right? There's going to have to be a really major infrastructure investment, east-west transportation, to get the cargo from the port, including Terminal 5, to the freeways and destinations, and that is something we're going to have to do regionally. It is, I'm sorry to say, not primarily a King County deal, but it's also not all in the city of Seattle. The state's going to have to step up and help make that happen.
Johnny?
No, it's interesting because that's, I think, the third or fourth time he's blamed the state for some of the actions as well, when we need to be working with our local jurisdiction. So it's kind of hard to vilify somebody, but also say you're going to work with them nicely as well, even considering that the incumbent has been in the legislature, understands that process, and is in charge of being able to mitigate some of these things. So I'll just call that out.
Okay.
I mean, I have to respond to that. Yeah, I mean, the state is in charge of stuff. The state's in charge of all tax authority. The state's in charge of what cities and counties and port districts are able to do. All of the things about which my opponent wants to complain are things that he could actually be having an effect on in the position he was just elected to in the state Senate.
And what's, I mean, if you got a chance
30.
to
Nope, I'm giving you 30 as well,
so-
sir.
Well, the interesting thing is this was the most diverse legislature in the history of Washington State. And we've done tremendous things to pass progressive policies to undo the harms that have been done over the past decades or so as well. So now asking the folks who are in power, who are newly in power, to be able to address a lot of these things, we are, and we're doing it quickly. And 100%, this is the state's jurisdiction to be able to work on these things as well. And that's why I wanted to run for King County Executive, is because I feel that the resources at the county level is where the rubber meets the road. You have to lead as an exec in order to get some of these things done.
Perfect. All right. I think we're down to our two last questions here. These are the fun ones. State Senator, you were elected to the 34th District as a state senator. Barely halfway through your first term, you announced that you were running for the top local office in the state. If you were unsuccessful in this race, are you planning to run for re-election, or can voters trust that you're going to stay in this position after trying to leave before your first half of the term, or just after halfway through your term for
Yeah.
another position? So yeah, that's a question that's come up. What?
Yeah, no, honestly, that's a great question, because I think that politics is about people and not careers. And my service in the legislature is not about climbing a political ladder or finding that next step. It's about how we can do what's best for the people who are here. I never expected to run for state senate. It was only because I was frustrated with how things were not working for our communities is the reason why I ran. And I ran against 10 other individuals and was able to win by 17% because the community agreed with me as well. And even for this particular race, this was not candidly my idea to jump into a race like this, especially after the year that we've had. But hearing so much from communities who've been impacted, seeing the issues that have been ignored, talking to folks that are frustrated with how things were not working, I felt compelled to do that because the community asked me to run as well. And that's the same thing with this, is that this is not about the seat, this is about the people you are trying to serve. So if they would like me to run again, happy to, and we'll do it if we're unsuccessful. But the goal is to win and is to serve the people, because that's why we're in public office.
Thank you. Dow?
Sure. After 2 years is it's a pretty quick time to turn around and say that you want a different job. I put in 12 years of learning, 12 years of effort at the State House and Senate and the County Council, serving in every position of responsibility on state budgets, on county budgets as the chair of the County Council before running for county executive. And my predecessors did the same. Ron Sims served 12 years. Gary Locke served 12 years, including many years as the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. This is a big, difficult job. It's not something to be undertaken lightly. And I'm really anxious to be able to be reelected and to take on, with the experience, the proven record I have, the tough challenges that are before us, with the opportunities that this moment provides.
Yep, 30 seconds to you.
It's also interesting that we just had this whole panel about the failures of the behavioral health system, the failures of the response to homelessness, even the criminal legal system as well. All of them are under the executive's authority. So maybe the way that we are doing things hasn't been working, or at the very least hasn't been working for communities who are impacted by policy. And look, that's what folks said about me when I first ran for state senate. Will he know what he's doing? And in fact, I rose to leadership very quickly, and we're able to get a lot of things done that people have been advocating for decades to accomplish. So yes, I think I have the private sector experience, the personal lived experience, and also the public sector experience to do well on day one.
Thank you. Executive, in a county that's increasingly diverse, and there's been a lot of calls for elevating voices of color, What does representation matters in the context of elected officials mean to you? Why are you the person to elevate those voices?
Right. Well, representation does matter, and I'm proud that our district is represented by the first Vietnamese American state senator. I'm also proud that I was preceded in office by Ron Sims and Gary Locke, two very distinguished leaders of color for a diverse county. But I don't think that my ethnicity, my race disqualifies me from being the executive of this county. I think I should be judged by the work I've done, by the teams I've built, by the fact that I built an equity and social justice office and then strategic plan and then implementation plan and then an anti-racism agenda created by our anti-racism core team of employees of color and a budgeting hundreds of millions of dollars to make genuine change inside county government and throughout our jurisdiction. I'm proud of the work that we're doing on transforming the criminal legal system, proud of the work that we're doing in economic justice, where I just signed a pro-equity contracting executive order co-created with Tabor 100 black professionals and contractors and other organizations to help grow black and brown economic power in this county. This is real work that we're doing. This is real substantive change, upending hundreds of years of entrenched systemic racism. And it is not easy work, but it is real. I've demonstrated my commitment, and I've demonstrated my ability to get it done.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And if you ask people from marginalized communities who've historically been left out, I think they care less about the words and so much as the actions. And even in the public health disparities that we're seeing right now, in the pandemic response, obviously folks from lower incomes or communities of color saw a huge disparity during this past time period. Even looking at infant mortality is worse for certain communities and communities of color than other ones as well. So this is not about just talking about this change, it's about doing it. Even the health and the contracting that was mentioned just now, even though that was an important issue, there has been a report that showed that there still are disparities in these contracts and they've persisted for a long time. So I appreciate the now focus on this particular issue about representation now that we have some of the more diverse legislators and leaders in this space. And this is something that we should be uplifting and amplifying and not just trying to fight to make sure that it's being heard.
Now 30 seconds, or are you good?
You know, the work that we're doing is, I think, region and nation leading. And the exciting part is that our team is, as it is in many areas of our responsibility, among the best that you'll find anywhere. So we listen to them, we take their lead, and as with the anti-racism core group, we adopt their recommendations, the policy agenda and the budget agenda.
Thank you. That's the end of the questioning for this evening. I will have a 3-minute closing statement available for both of you. I believe, Senator, you went first last time, so County Executive, I will let you go first.
Well, thank you again to the Chamber for putting this on. It's an unusual time to be campaigning because during COVID we're almost never able to be anywhere in person. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to have this moment to communicate our platforms. You know, I'm really honored to serve in this position. I could have done a lot of other things in my life. Things were probably less stressful. But the ability to affect real change in this community that I love, the ability to protect and restore the environment, or to make the county more capable of delivering for the people, delivering on the promise that we've made that this will be a welcoming community where every person can thrive. That is meaningful work to do with one's life. I'm really honored that I've been recognized for that work by so many people in my reelection. People are supporting me. I mentioned labor unions, but also business organizations like the Eastside Business Alliance, the Rental Housing Association, Seattle King County Realtors, people with whom I'm not always ideologically aligned, but they know that I am a person who is pragmatic and can get things done. And Governors Inslee and Gregoire and Locke and some 35 of my opponent's Democratic colleagues in the state legislature, 32 of them from King County, in fact. My family, as you mentioned earlier, lives in West Seattle. We all live in the same block where I was raised. Folks might even know my parents, see them toddling around. My mom taught at Madison Junior High for 25 years and then retired from West Seattle High School. I'm so grateful to live in a supportive community like this, and the ability to provide help when it's needed, like the nation's leading COVID response, or bringing high-capacity transit to our neighborhood, or helping every child with Best Starts for Kids, or standing up the places we need to get people in out of homelessness and get them the help they need. That I wouldn't trade for anything. That is deeply meaningful work. I'm grateful to our state representatives, Eileen Cody and Joe Fitzgibbon, for their endorsements, to our county council member, Joe McDermott, for his endorsement, to the Mayor Burien, Jimmy Mata, to our shared 34th District Democrats who endorsed my campaign. And I'm particularly grateful to the voters of King County, because I won every one of our 17 legislative districts by substantial margins in the primary election, including, most meaningfully to me, the 34th legislative district, where we both live and serve. I'm grateful for the opportunity tonight, and although I know you don't make endorsements, I would appreciate everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Again, thank you to have the opportunity to be able to speak today too. Really, the conversations that we've had highlighted the issues that we're facing, things that we've been facing before this pandemic, which truly magnified a lot of the issues that we've been fighting for decades to accomplish. And the reason why I'm running for this office, candidly, is because I am impatient. And the very fact that I'm in this race shows that I'm unafraid of tackling big issues. And just using the legislature as an example, people who are impacted by policy are now at the table fixing them. People impacted by policy are now at the table fixing them. So it's a bit rich for me to see people who've been in power for so long, while these issues have gotten worse, now say all of a sudden, we'll be able to fix it, don't worry, give us another chance. If you were a small business owner and the core functions of one of your employees was being unmet for years, you'd have to figure something out or find something new as well. I'm running for office because I believe we deserve a better future. This is a pivotal moment where we can choose what the future of King County looks like, one that is inclusive, one that is focused on action, one that can tackle the root causes of a lot of these issues that we're facing us today. My family has been here since they moved from Vietnam. My family is here right now, and I want to be able to see them be successful and thrive as well. But that's not necessarily going to be the case if we don't have leaders who will act urgently to address the problems we are facing today. So I appreciate the time being able to speak, and I'm honored to be able to serve the folks in West Seattle.
Thank you. Well, with that, this wraps up the King County executive portion of our evening. We will take a small intermission and reset the stage. We did have a request out for a debate between Bruce Harrell and Lorena Gonzalez. She had a previous event and was unable to make it. We thought we found a time frame that might work for her, but was unable to attend still. So we didn't want to deprive our membership of getting to know Bruce a little better. So we're going to reset the stage, and we will be back shortly with a Q&A with mayoral candidate Bruce Harrell. Hi, welcome back. We are at the Live Oak streaming studios here in South Park, socially distanced in a great spot. We do have Bruce Harrell running for Seattle mayor, and we'd really just like to get to know you here a little Q&A, and I'm going to start it off with an opening statement from you.
Thank you, Dan. Well, thanks for sharing your Saturday night with me. We could be doing a lot of things, but nothing better than discussing the future of West Seattle and Seattle. So my name is Bruce Harrell. I'm running for mayor of Seattle. And I will tell you that I think right now that Seattle is really starving for decisive, value-based decision-making and leadership. They're not looking for knee-jerk reactions. They want action. They don't want anyone that makes excuses. They want to see deliverables. They want our businesses revitalized. They want to be able to profit and prosper and have an environment by which their voices are heard. They want effective public safety, 7-minute response times. They also want bias-free policing and racism eradicated from not only our city, but in particular our public safety as well. And they want people out of parks, off of sidewalks, off of playgrounds, and moved into housing. And that's why I'm running for mayor. That I was born and raised in the city. I was educated in our public school system. I attended the University of Washington. I've been active in political and civic activities pretty much my entire adulthood. And I'm joined here, although she's off camera, with my wife, who attended the University of Washington with me. We've been active in civic communities and educational work. And again, thank you for having me. I'd be absolutely honored if the great people of West Seattle and West Seattle have voted me to be our next mayor, and I'm ready to hit the ground running.
Excellent. Well, let's get into some questions here and let the voters of West Seattle know what you're about. Your opponent is firmly for defunding the police, 50%. She's been very loud about that, very supportive of that movement. Where do you fall on that? And in general, public safety is a big concern for the business community and just the safety of everybody. The feeling out there right now is that we are losing too many officers, that we are maybe not giving them the respect that's needed to keep the good ones around that we're looking to retain. And that I think most people that we've spoken to in West Seattle agree that there is options out there that need to be explored and implemented that have less armed officers respond to mental health and drug issues and nonviolent crime. But there's a feeling out there that we are defunding or reducing the police force before we have those systems stood up to actually move in that direction. And it's going to leave us in a spot that's quite vulnerable. What are your feelings around the public safety and how we should implement reform?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I do not use the narrative of defunding the police. That everything I know, everything that I've learned in organizational design would suggest that if you want a department or an organization to optimize their conduct, optimize their performance, be the best, you do not starve it from resources. In fact, you do quite the opposite. You invest in it and you make sure that the outcomes you're trying to drive reflect the right investment. So specifically in the police department, we're down to about 900 officers. That is unacceptable. I believe in funding them to the levels of 1,300 to 1,400 officers. I would agree that we have to eradicate racism and unreasonable force in the department. We have to change its culture. So under my plan, we will recruit differently, we will train differently, we will examine everywhere a gun and badge goes. In fact, I introduced a program, a certification process by which we will recruit many members of our society, perhaps underrepresented communities as an example, who want to give themselves to public safety, that are interested in that, but they do not want to carry a gun and badge. Perhaps they want an unarmed response. So we will have a certification process by which that person could join the public safety ranks. And we will then use them as first responders in many examples where police go now. But make no mistake about it. Our officers under my leadership will be culturally sensitive, culturally competent. They will be present. They will be out of the cars. We will fund them appropriately because that's our charter purpose. And even though those who may yell the loudest or may be fully passionate about eradicating racism and unreasonable force, I hear them. You don't have to tell me, from someone that grew up in the Central District, about use of force by the police. This should not be a divisive conversation. Whether you're black or white or yellow, brown or red or anything combination there, rich, poor, in the middle, it makes no difference. Everyone wants to feel safe. So that's what you're going to get under the Harrell administration. We will not mince words about this. When I gave my kickoff, I had police officers at my kickoff around 8 months ago. These are good officers. So you're going to see us create a culture change within our department, but you're going to know we're heading in the right direction, and you're going to see our layer of public safety in the city that in recent years we could only thought of, but we will change the narrative relative to public safety.
With that, one of the biggest things coming up around public safety is going to be the next mayor will most likely appoint the next permanent chief of police, be that the current individual or someone from outside. What will you be looking for in the qualifications of the next chief of police?
Sure, and I've had some good productive conversation with Chief Diaz. And I'll tell you sort of what that looks like to respond to your question directly, Dan. So my next chief of police will have to be a person that when he or she walks in a room, not only will they command respect because they know best practices, but they will know that they have to build community trust. They will be able to go into the toughest neighborhoods and the most sophisticated boardrooms and make everyone feel valued. They'll be a master at communication and listening. But most importantly, they will help me change the culture within the police department. They will find a way to look at the informal leaders in the police department, many who will be in the rank and file, and they will help me celebrate the many victories we will have in changing the culture, and they will denounce the kind of despicable acts and murderous acts we see throughout this country, and they will say, this is a great city, and you all are going to help me build it. So they will be the kind of person that, again, commands respect when he or she walks in the room. And I don't know if Chief Diaz has ever worked with that kind of support, that kind of empowerment. So in all transparency, I've had chiefs of police all over the country already contact me. They are watching this race. They realize that I want our police department to succeed. I want the next police chief to succeed. And I've had a good relationship with former chiefs, and they know that I am critical about unreasonable force, but they also know that I have a standard of excellence that I expect. And that is going to be the mantra of our next chief of police, a standard of excellence. And so I look forward to whoever that person will be.
Excellent, thank you. When it comes to removing some things from the police's purview, I believe we've heard from several of our members that police have been the catch-all of everything that society has failed in drug, mental health addiction, or mental health issues and drug addiction. It rolls down to the police to be the responder. And I don't think anyone dreamed of being a cop when they grew up to go treat mental health issues that they've received 40 hours of training. What parts should be moved out of the police department, and what organization should be stood up to take those parts on?
Yeah. So that's when I said earlier about defining where a gun and badge needs to go. So I'll answer it directly by saying this, that the firefighters have warmly endorsed me because they epitomize the kind of service I want to see from a first responder. That they do not discriminate based on any demographic differences, that they try to save lives, and they are respected for that. So the new police officer will have to be a master at de-escalation and mediation. But we do not need a gun and badge to go to Charlene Lyle's apartment. There we need a new kind of first responder. So when I look at a new kind of officer, many of whom will, for example, give traffic stops or traffic tickets and do that kind of work, I do not think we need a gun and badge for that kind of work. Now, these have to be bargained for labor conditions. I understand that. But I'm not just thinking about 2022, I'm thinking about 2032. So we will look at situations that require a health crisis expert, and that's where we'll put there. Now, let me also make something clear, because this part that I'm about to say has not been part of the conversations. We spend a lot of time on the front end thinking about who should respond. And yes, I put my hand up when it says we need a mental health counselor at the scene. We need a better first responder at the scene. We all could agree on that. But the systems with respect to where that person should be taken are still lack. So I'm using the term a safe harbor. And we have sobriety centers, we have certain trauma centers that a person can be taken. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at the back end, and we're going to find out, in a Charlene Lyles case, for example, we do not want her taken to the jail. She'll be released, and that's not the right place for her because she had not committed any crime. Remember, she called the police to report a burglary. We do not want her checked into the hospital because she'll be checked out, and there won't be follow-up case management services. So we're going to look at we're going to put resources on the back end such that we will know where to take that person in a health crisis. The safe harbor will be a physical place by which we'll do the follow-up case management work that needs to be done. That will take the pressure off of the officers. The city will know, the dispatchers know exactly who to dispatch, and that's where the real work begins. That's how we're going to have a safer Seattle. We will not see these needless deaths that we see in crisis situations.
Thank you. So you spent some time on the city council. You've even were the council president. What are your greatest achievements that you felt you put together while you were there?
Yeah, well, what I'm probably most proud of, I'll use one as an example, is when we looked at what happened in Texas in our power world, that when I looked at our city light rates, I know this is not a hot, sexy subject, but I want to talk about that a little bit because it's going to demonstrate how I will act as an executive. When I looked at how City Light operates, it occurred to me, I said, who sets the rates? And they said, well, the politicians do. Well, what are their backgrounds to do that? Do they know cost allocation? Do they know how to amortize the equipment schedules? How are they skilled to do that? Now, I happen to know telecommunications, and I was experienced in the regulatory world, but I looked at my bench, and I said, well, no one has any expertise. It was the city council. So I said, well, what I need to do is look at our most valuable customers, those that are paying about $1 million a month. Nucor, Boeing, about $1 million a month. Then I looked at the low-income advocates who want to protect the rates for the lower-income people. I looked at climate change advocates, and I said, I want to give those people access to the same information that the city council and the mayor gets. I created the City Light Review Panel. And in that process, we were able to drive rates down. We'll be able to create a $100 million rate stabilization account to protect us from rate volatility. But most importantly, we were transparent. So that rate stabilization account is something that I created, I thought about it, and I pushed it through, and it was against many conventional wisdom, I'll put it that way. Now, you're going to see that approach to opening up the data, open sourcing it, allowing in many of our critical functions, capital improvement costs, for example, for a bridge, let's say as an example. You're going to see in our homelessness work, you're going to see cost per person, cost per unit, where people are now, where we're going to measure them with milestones. I'm a firm believer in opening up the data such that everyone could see. Transparency. Now, I'm probably best known for the race and social justice work that we do. Everyone talks about race and social justice initiative. And I'm proud that Greg Nichols endorsed me because he came up with the idea of a race and social justice initiative. But what I did is I converted it to a law. I converted it to a lens by which we lead everything with an equity lens. I then introduced the bias-free policing law to look at how we are policing. I also was the first person to put money in for kids to go to school because that was a huge impediment, now known as the Seattle Promise. But I looked at one of the biggest impediments for kids to go to school, it's money. And these kids graduating with a 2.6, 2.7 GPA. We started it here in West Seattle, by the way, right at South College. And then we converted that to using the SOTO tax to make sure kids have a pathway to prosperity, self-optimization. So a lot of my work looked at underrepresented people building a pathway, because that's my life story. My mom and dad did not go to college, and I had opportunities that I could only dream of in this city because they were mentors and they were pathways. And so those are a few things that I worked on. And people want to know why I sponsored Ban the Box. And many of your business people, business clients were a little thinking, well, where's Harrell going with his Ban the Box discussion? Shouldn't I have a right to know about the criminal background of a person? And what I said was, certainly you do, and you will. But let's first, during the front end of the process, let's look at their qualifications because they paid their debt to society. And by the way, you give that person a chance, it's going to reduce recidivism. You're going to have a better worker, a better employee who may appreciate the job more. So let's have that discussion. I worked collaboratively with the business community, and it turned out to be good policy, eventually adopted by the state.
Excellent. So you didn't run for re-election for the council a couple years ago. What drove that decision?
Well, 12 years. of putting my DNA into this city, the city that I love so much. But I had chose to retire from politics, and my wife and I are in a pretty good space. Our kids were out of the house, thank God. and and I decided, I believe in shared leadership, and didn't want to do 16 years at that point in my personal life. So my wife and I made some decisions, and I went back to practice law. I still have too much energy to retire, and I was doing work in technology work and in affordable housing space, and really loving it. And then I sort of looked, quite frankly, at what's happening in City Hall, what's happening in our public safety world, what's happening in our small business world. And I don't like missing a good party. And what I mean by that is this city's going to redefine itself right now. We didn't think we'd ever be walking around in masks like this, right? We didn't think we'd see something like George Floyd being killed on national TV. We didn't think we'd live through this kind of stuff, but we are. And we have a chance now to redefine our future. And I think the life lessons that I've had in my personal life, professional life, and on the council sort of lend itself to perhaps bringing a great team of people in City Hall. Not bureaucrats, but people who will lead with values, have real life experience, business acumen, social justice credibility. So I said, let's not miss this opportunity. And I said, I'm going to go all in. But I will tell you, I had many parties in 2019, and those were some good parties to say goodbye. And I did not plan on returning. But I do love public service, and I think this is an opportunity. I think this is our time, and I think it's the Chamber's time. I know that the Chamber has wanted their voice heard in many of the civic discussions down at City Hall. Many of them can't get down there on Mondays at 2 o'clock, by the way. So I think this is our time to change the narrative in this city, and I look forward to being a part of it.
Excellent. So with all of this, you're inspired to come back in. You're going to be working with some colleagues that you recently left behind. I think some of them have endorsed your opponent in this race. It's no secret that the current mayoral administration has a strained relationship with the council. And 70% of Seattle, more than 70% of Seattle, think we're on the wrong track from the latest polling. And we've got a little bit of a divisive council. And how do you build a relationship that actually can move things through that council that are your priorities? If they even slightly differ from the current council, it seems like things get stuck pretty quick to not moving forward. How do you break through and build that relationship and really move the city forward?
Well, I have a few reactions on that. Number one, structurally, we changed to a district setup a few years ago, as you well know. But we have not radically changed how we do business. And so one of my structural changes will be to put $10 million in each of the city council members' budget. And I want to do that to give them the tools to succeed, to fix potholes or help with small business revitalization, to help with encampment issues, with cleanliness issues, garbage and litter issues. I want them to have the tools to succeed. And my hope is that they are evaluated by how well they serve their constituencies. I will meet with each of them consistently because there are many things we do have in common, and I will help them champion their causes. All of them went into office to serve the public. And so I will try to find desperately that common ground. That's always been my style. How can we champion something together? But make no mistake about it, that we've had mayors who have led with legislation on some of the biggest issues, and that's my responsibility to lead. So I will have those conversations with them. I will give them tools to succeed. But also, I think, just like I will be held accountable, they will be held accountable. And I know that their election cycle will be coming up pretty shortly during my second term. And so we'll have those conversations, and I look forward to them.
Excellent. To circle back into public safety just a little bit, looking at, and this is kind of outside your scope a smidge here, but looking at the current folks who are running for city attorney, can we move the city forward with abolition of the criminal justice system? What do we need in partnership between the mayor and the city's attorney's office to help with these crimes that are affecting businesses, and even the victimization of homeless folks as well? If we're not prosecuting, how are we helping? What do we need to move forward to actually clean up the streets, get folks the help they need, and the stick almost. You need the stick and the carrot approach, right? How do we build that together and make sure that the city attorney's office is on the same page?
Yeah, so I'm not following that race closely, but I'm keenly aware that we sort of have a bookend approach from these two candidates. And I've had the pleasure of just sort of on a social basis pass by each one of them, and I've watched just glimpses of them on different forums. So I'm prepared to work with either one. We don't know who's going to win that one. It is my job to create a vision for the city that we will not criminalize poverty. We will lead with compassion, but we will also realize that there are certain criminal and civil laws there on the books for a reason. We have to be decisive. We have to remember that there are victims of crimes, and that even though we have a misdemeanor code, that many of these misdemeanors are serious. Stalking is not something that we joke about. Domestic violence is not something we joke about. And so I will make sure that we have a balanced approach. But I've said this earlier during my introductory remarks. Effective public safety is a unifying, not a divisive subject. That I want all communities to feel safe at all parts of the city. West Seattle deserves that. And businesses, when you talk to business owners, and I've been here talking to many business owners, I've been through business districts throughout the city, that they know that they need a safe environment by which to offer their goods and services. They expect this. This is our charter amendment. So I will be prepared to work with either city attorney, but it's incumbent upon me to make sure that my vision as the executive is understood by either one.
Excellent. Now, with in regards to homelessness, what is the plan? We've had a 10-year plan. We've had some other plans. We see the highest numbers of homelessness that we've had after almost 15 years, is throwing millions, hundreds of millions, or close to $1 billion at the problem. What is your plan to actually get people into services, treatment, and off the streets that is actually what's going to move forward? How do you work with the new Regional Homeless Authority? How are we going to clean up the parks and the streets and do it with compassion?
Sure. So I do support the Regional Housing Authority. I think that has been a differing opinion between my opponent and I. That I support it because I think a regional approach only makes sense. Now, I've said publicly that I will build 1,000 units in the first 6 months and another 1,000 units in the first 12 months, which will be 2,000 units during the first year. And yes, that is similar to the Charter 29 amendment. I'm not trying to be coy there. That I will publish a plan that will show cost per person, cost per unit. It is a measurable plan with identifiable milestones. You know, we're spending $200 million now. We'll get another $116 million from recovery ARPA funds. We will also create a manner by which people can donate money in the philanthropic communities. I need these wealthy corporations. I need all hands on deck. And I need people to help as well. People do not have an entry point. They don't know how they can help. So we're going to create a portal, if you will, where people can help as well. We will bring out the best in this city so people could realize that their help is needed. So I will build, again, the channel by which people can give food, give resume assistance. We know that, and we heard the executive and his challenger describe this well. This problem has been decades and decades in the making. We've underfunded mental health. We've underfunded special education, drug and alcohol treatment. There were drugs poured into underrepresented communities in the 70s, and we're looking at the whole aftershocks of underinvestment. But my plan not only talks about housing people and giving them individualized case management services. That's part of that. But under my longer-term plan, because again, I'm thinking about 2032, I'm thinking about 2042. We'll look at brain development from 0 to 4. That's why we are now in the pre-K investment strategy world, to look at the critical path of brain development from 0 to 4. We'll look at high school, and that's why I'm creating a Seattle Job Center, and we will continue to scholarship kids to move on, and we'll look at the predictors of homelessness. And the data would suggest that the safeguards that break down in someone's life can be predicted at an early age, and you could see that. That's the common denominator of the homelessness community, that all of their safeguards have broken down. So we'll look at how we could retool people. We will also look at our bench strength on people that do this kind of work. The social workers, they are underpaid, underappreciated, and so working with higher education, We'll look at how do we, again, get a pipeline of help of people who can do the work in these communities because we so desperately need it. The opioid crisis is a great example. So as we continue to get people out of the playgrounds, off the sidewalks, in the supportive housing, we'll also look at how the continuum works to make sure we don't find ourselves in this predicament again. And I tell you, I think we could figure this out in Seattle. We have a great hand here in Seattle. We have a compassionate people. We have to remember that we have a lot of resources around us. We should not look at it from a position of scarcity. And so part of my job will be to find all of those resources and to align corporations and their corporate social responsibility goals to align it with our core needs: housing, affordable housing, homelessness, et cetera. And that's what we'll do.
So I think you bring up a great point in that I think differentiates between your opponent and yourself. And a lot of the political spin out there right now is that everything's Amazon or big business's fault, and they can go ahead and kick rocks and take off. Like, I don't care if they go to Virginia. I don't care if they go to these places. I will tell you on a personal level, as a restaurant owner in West Seattle with a bridge closed, those tech workers ordering from my restaurant through the pandemic with a bridge closed probably helped most of us stay afloat. Not just them specifically, but that is a large percentage of what we had. So I would hate to see all of those workers move away. There seems to be a sense in City Hall that we can survive without Amazon, and we probably could figure it out. Should we repair that relationship? And if so, can you be the person who helps do that, to bring them to the table, to help bring them in, not just Amazon, but the big companies that are feeling, let's say, persecuted to an extent?
Yeah. So I'll be very clear on this point, that there will be winners and losers coming out of this pandemic. The winners will be those who know how to retain jobs and how to have an atmosphere by which small businesses and large businesses can thrive. Now, we will hold large businesses accountable. We will hold high wealth individuals accountable. I've been on record by saying I supported the capital gains tax as one example, that we all know we have a very regressive tax scheme. And you look at the state legislature, that they were able to really pass some pretty aggressive climate change laws this year, some police reform laws. Many of these fine leaders have endorsed my candidacy. So we'll look at the regressive nature of our tax scheme as well. But make no mistake about it, I want the large employers and the small employers' tax dollars to stay here. That my black family came here from Louisiana for jobs and economic development. My Japanese grandparents came here for the exact same thing. That we want, from the janitor and the security guard to the chief technology officer, we want their jobs here. So the rhetoric of being anti-business or anti-people, for that matter, we don't use that narrative in my campaign. When I say that, often people will say, well, you're just giving large business a pass. But then you have to look at my personal life. I litigated matters against some of the largest and most powerful corporations. I've represented women in gender discrimination cases, class action cases. So I believe in holding corporations liable, but I also value what they bring to a vibrant community. And I think that's the leader. That's what a good, effective leader does, and that's the kind of mayor that I hope to be.
There are a number of people that are concerned about a plan to create complete the missing link for the Duwamish Trail by the Longhouse for a bike infrastructure lane. That is one of the heavy truck corridors that T5 is going to be utilizing. There is currently a plan being put forward to take away a lane to do a protected bike lane there. There's a lot of industry down there, blue collar and union jobs in that area, that are concerned about their ability to operate with a bicycle lane on a heavy freight corridor. Would you be willing, if you take office in January, to pause and re-examine that, as a lot of the businesses in that area felt that they were not properly consulted or brought to the table on how that would impact jobs down there? And we'll be furthermore on that part, that impacts the port, and the port is such a driver of family wage jobs, good paying union jobs here, and we are the gateway really for all Asian products to come in. It's us in Long Beach and Tacoma. We want to grow that port, but if we take away capacity, that's going to hurt that ability. And as we see shipping costs go from $1,500 a container to $20,000, I'm seeing cost of goods on my small business. I'm talking to mechanics who are seeing rotors and brake pads double in price because of the shipping costs. How do we move freight through West Seattle, and how do we both complete bike infrastructure and allow heavy freight to operate coexistent?
Yeah, so I'm very honored to have the support of many port commissioners, either past and current commissioners supporting my campaign, as well as many port employees and many people in industry and in the maritime port world. We were first a maritime city, and we've built other industries on top of that. So to answer your question directly, absolutely, 100%. I'll be more than happy to have a very collaborative discussion. That's the only style of leadership I know. My mind is not made up on any of these critical transportation issues, and I will make sure that I lead the discussions and put resources behind the discussions to make sure that freight can move, that, again, part of the transportation infrastructure when we look at the transit master plan in a year will be to look at how we are safe in the city and where bike lanes make sense and where they do not. And so I look forward to those discussions, and certainly we'll commit resources behind it.
Excellent. With a
Did
big
you say
question over here.
did you say my closing statement's about ready? Is that what you said?
You're after you got one more question.
Okay. I told you I'd throw a joke in there sooner or later.
Yep. We're just about to that.
Hey, this
that
is a
minute.
hot debate here over here. I got to tell you.
So, last question I'll throw out. Let's pick the last question for you here. West Seattle Bridge. That's a hot topic over here.
There's something wrong with the West Seattle Bridge right now?
I was inside it the other week. It looks better, but it's not quite back to health yet. Will you order any sort of study on what caused the bridge to happen and what should have happened beforehand to find when they should have caught and fixed this before it got to the point of near collapse? And what can we do as a city moving forward to get more connectivity between West Seattle and downtown? We have been disconnected from the viaduct being torn down, a giant seismic retrograde to the Spokane Street viaduct, the tunnel being installed, and then the bridge going down. It's been about 14 years since we've been able to drive out of West Seattle easy.
Yeah. And I'm going to even weave into some gondola love into that question that I know my predecessors in the debate had to address a question, because I've been talking to some people about the gondola as a possibility. And I have many friends in SDOT, and I've worked closely with SDOT over the years. And I think that what's demonstrated in this discussion on the bridge problem is, again, the lack of trust, the lack of faith that people have in city government right now. Because the public still do not have a satisfactory answer as to why did it occur and why didn't we catch it. So in my discussions, we said, well, we have an inspection process, and inspection process is X or Y. But I don't think that anyone validates that process. And so how do we know X and Y is an inspection schedule, or the data they're using, or the methodology that they're using is the right one? Apparently it is not. And so what I expect to do is to find out on a deeper dive how we make sure our inspection schedules and those actually doing the inspection, the methodology is a best practice, because clearly it is not. I am disappointed that we are still left with this situation that West Seattleites are in, with this incredible inconvenience. So the good news is, talking to some transportation employees last week, that it should be scheduled, it should be improved on time or before time, that we have no excuses. So we'll look forward to that. And as we continue to do our bridge inspections throughout the city, we'll make sure that we are inspecting properly using best practices. I don't think that, and quite frankly, there should be some, a deeper dive on who made the decisions and who didn't. I mean, I just think that's just, my mom and dad work for the city, and I will tell you that, one in the library, one for City Light, and that they had a standard of excellence that was high. And we did not demonstrate a standard of excellence in SDOT on this issue. And we just had to be open and transparent about that and find out who should be responsible for that. Now, when I mention the gondola, I will say that we have been working feverishly on getting light rail to West Seattle. So I do not think I would entertain a discussion on replacing that with a gondola, but it does interest me. I would like to put some resources behind exploring it. A person was kind enough to send me an article that talked about electrification of transit. I mean, I read the article thoroughly, and it talked about gondolas used in different countries, and it is very intriguing. So not in place of, but perhaps in addition to. So I'm going to look at that closer. But we've been working really hard to get light rail here, and I look forward to seeing that to completion.
As do we, yes. Well, excellent. I know you've had a long day. I appreciate you making the journey over. You had an event earlier. I'm sure you've had several events earlier. Made it over here, and I know it's your birthday tomorrow. So we're
Yes.
gonna be easy on you here and let you do a closing statement and let the viewers hear your last thoughts on why you should be elected the next mayor of Seattle.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank all of you for sharing your Saturday night with me. Well, as I said earlier, this is our moment. This is our defining moment where I think that we can bring value-based, data-based decisions in the City Hall. We will not react as simply to people who often will yell the loudest. We'll make sure that the voice of the small business is heard, is at the table. We will then take that voice and translate it into regulations or lack of regulations. We've seen that in COVID, that sometimes when you get out of the way and let businesses do their thing, it could be using the built environment to allow them to expand and use their creativity. It could be establishing stronger business-to-business relationship, giving them access to capital, using perhaps below-market lending tools through community development financial institutions or community block grant organizations. You will see in our Office of Economic Development sort of an account system, and by that I mean that you will know who will be responsible to you. You will have go-to people. We'll have a working relationship. You will have access. But most importantly, your voice will be heard. That was the mayor that I will commit to being. That is what I've done for a living, being an attorney to so many small businesses, both profit and nonprofit. It's fun. It's exciting. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing a person risk their capital, risk their time to employ people and see the expression of success at the end of the day, at the end of the week. This is Seattle. That's the Seattle I want to see. So I'm not running with my fist balled to fight. I'm running with my hands open. My hands are open because I want to have that friendship to all of you. So I'm asking that in a couple of weeks when you start voting, I ask for your support. I say this is our time, and I say this to many communities that support me. I've been warmly embraced by so many people on this race. I'm excited. So thank you very much for having me on a Saturday night, and I'm going to look forward to having my birthday with my wife tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Well, happy birthday. All right. And I'd like to thank everyone who's watching for joining us tonight, along with King County Executive Dow Constantine and State Senator Joe Nguyen and candidate for mayor here, Bruce Harrell. Thank you all for here. I'd like to thank Live Oak for providing this COVID-safe environment to be able to get all of the candidates together and stream this out to the public in the best possible production quality we could do. So thank you, everyone, and remember to vote. It's the most important thing we can do right now. Thanks.